Live. Let's see if this will work. Hopefully it will. Let me see if I can get Instagram Live going on real quick. As you are tuning in, I'd love to know, number one, where you're tuning in from. Number two, I'd love to know 3 things you are grateful for. Let's see if I can get my little setup going over here. Pretty good. Checking the connection. Let's see if this will work. All right, there we go. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, Instagram Live, Facebook Live. Vladimir, nice to see you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Marilyn, welcome back. Now, as you're tuning in, today's topic in our 100-day personal performance and business growth challenge is the difference between good strategy and bad strategy. Now, you see my beautiful wife over my shoulder right there. We are traveling. We're coming to Austin, Texas to come and visit our business mentor for the week, do a board meeting. Let's see. Sam, nice to see you from Colombia. Samuel. Hey, Priya. I think it's Priya from Mombasa, Kenya. Welcome back. Samuel, welcome, welcome. So again, as you're tuning in, love to know, number one, where you're tuning in from. Number two, love to know 3 things you're grateful for. And as you are jotting that in, hello from London, welcome. Paraguay, welcome. Fun people from all over the world. Brooks, nice to see you. Welcome back. So let me read you a couple key points. And this is important because when you sit down to create your strategy of how you're going to make your goals happen. I was talking to a young lady this morning. Hello from Florida, hello from India, welcome friends. I was talking to someone this morning and they were talking about, Carrie, good morning from Australia. Nice to see you. Grateful for my health and opportunity. Lots of love from Colombia, very nice. Kelowna, Canada, hello from India. So I was talking to someone this morning, hello from Toronto, good day. And what we were talking about is she said she wanted to become a pilot. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. What's your plan? What's your strategy to become a pilot? And she's like, well, in the family I come from and the situation I'm in, it's way too expensive for me to be a pilot. And I didn't say, how expensive is it? And she goes, well, my parents can't help me be a pilot. I'm only in 12th grade, and it's out of our budget as a family. And I was like, well, again, you're caught up on interesting facts, but those aren't the facts we're paying attention to. The question is, how are you going to make it possible to become a pilot? And the real question I'm asking is, what is your strategy? How will you make this happen? And so when you write out your goals, and we've talked about this before in an earlier session, what do you need? What do you want? What do you desire? How do you need it? How do you want it? How do you desire it? What do you want to get out of 2019? What do you want to give to 2019? What's your ideal day vision that you want to be living throughout this year? And as you look at all these different aspects, as they start to come together, we then have to start at some point talking about what is your strategy? Not what the goal is. A goal and a strategy are 2 radically different things. The goal is where you're headed. The strategy is that how are you going to get there? What's the strategy? What are the tactical things you're going to do to actually get the result you want? Now, I was reading this book, and it talks about 4 things that help you identify if you have a bad strategy, and then I'll tell you a couple things that help you identify if you have a good strategy. So, the number one thing that shows you have a bad strategy is what he calls fluff. Fluff is a form of gibberish masquerading as strategic concepts or arguments. It uses Sunday words that are inflated and unnecessarily abstruse, and apparently esoteric concepts to create the illusion of high-level thinking. Now, I don't know if you've ever done this, but I certainly have, where you get all freaking excited and we start coming up with really creative ways to talk about what it is we're going to achieve. So, fluff is a superficial restatement of the obvious combined with general generous sprinklings of buzzwords. So this is not a good strategy. Let me give you an example. It talks about a bank, and the bank says, our fundamental strategy is one of consumer-centric intermediation. and it sounds cool. It sounds like one of those power statements people use for their strategy when they're going to achieve something big. And I'll read it again. Our fundamental strategy is one of consumer-centric intermediation. Now, intermediation means depositing funds and then lending them to others. So basically what banks do. And so if you sum it up and take out the power phrases, the bank is saying what our bank's fundamental strategy is to be a bank. And then you scratch your head and go, wow, that doesn't seem anywhere near as powerful. Now, I get juicing it up with powerful words, but what you really need is an actual strategy. How are you going to stand out from the different competitors? How are you actually going to get the job done? Saying, the way we're going to stand out is just by being a bank. That's not standing out. Are you going to offer something more than your competitors? Are you going to do it differently? Are you going to have some creative actual strategy to make this happen? So the number one thing I want you to do is comb through and think about the plan you're using to go achieve the results you want to achieve this year. And the first thing to ask myself is like, hey, is my plan filled with fluff? Fluff meaning fluffy words that make it sound bigger than it is, and it lacks an actual tangible strategy. And again, we'll talk what the strategy actually is in a few moments. But we're going to talk about what's not strategy or bad strategy first. So number one is when it's filled with a lot of fluff. Number two, a failure to face the challenge. Bad strategy fails to recognize or define the actual challenge at hand. When you cannot define the challenge, you can't evaluate a strategy to improve it. So another piece that represents bad strategy is when there's no challenge. Meaning you say, what do you want to achieve this year? And they say, sell 50 million in real estate. You go, great. What's the challenge? And they go, there is no challenge. I just have to go do it. And you go, ooh, that's a bad strategy. How do I know that's a bad strategy? Because we know there's a challenge. There might be a challenge in number one, people don't know who you are. Number two, they don't trust you. Number three, they don't like you. Number four, they've never done business with you. Number five, they have, but they haven't done it in a long time, and you need to recruit them. Like, we need to identify what's the actual obstacle in the way of the result you want. And if people say there is no obstacle, then you would have it. So there's an obstacle. The obstacle might be the amount of time it takes, the amount of effort it takes, the amount of marketing dollars it takes. There is an obstacle there. You have to identify what's the real obstacle. So that number one, fluff. Number two, failure to face the challenge. Number three, mistaking a goal for a strategy. Many bad strategies are just statements of desires rather than a plan to overcome the obstacle. So a lot of strategy, people say, well, what's your strategy? My strategy is to grow by 100% this year. That's the strategy. And no. That's the goal. That's the result you want. That's not the strategy. How are you going to grow by 100% this year? What specifically are you going to do? What times and what days? How are you going to actually get there, if that makes sense? So number one, fluff. Number two, failure to identify and face a challenge. Number three, mistaking a goal for strategy. And number four, bad strategic objectives. A strategic objective is set by a leader as a means to an end. Strategic objectives are bad when they fail to address critical issues or when they're impracticable. It's an interesting word. Hello from Chiang Mai. And so this piece is we want to avoid bad strategies. So then we got to flip back and we got to say, okay, what's good strategy? Now, good strategy is really simple. It has three key elements. And let's see. Let me find the three key elements. Oh, scrolling back. Don't worry, I highlighted and starred them. So strategy should mean a cohesive response to an important challenge. So the strategy contains elements. Number one, a diagnosis. What is the actual problem that I have to overcome to get the result I want? So number one, what's the challenge? Number two, you then have to have a diagnosis, a guiding policy. What's the plan to actually overcome this challenge? And then number three, a coherent action. What are the actions? So 3 parts. Number one, you got to identify the problem. Number two, you have to come up with a plan. And number three, you have to come up with actual actions you're going to take to overcome it. Now that creates a good strategy. A bad strategy is everything we just talked about. So fluff, failure to identify a real challenge, mistaking a goal for strategy, or bad strategic objectives. So let's start real quick. As a group, you all have your goals, you all have your visions of what you want to do this year. So the very first thing I'm going to ask you for today is, what is the number one obstacle you must overcome in order to achieve the results you want in 2019? So what's the number one obstacle you have to overcome? Meaning we have to identify what is the obstacle between you and the result you want. So in the comment section, I'd love to know. And let's start with first, what is the key result, the number one result you want to achieve in 2019? What's the number one result you want to achieve in 2019? So first, toss that in the comment section. And then right next to it, if you want to write a second thing, is after you write the number one result of what you want to achieve in 2019, next, what is the number one obstacle that is between you and the actual result you want? So let's see. Someone says myself is the number one obstacle. Someone says procrastination is the number one obstacle. Interesting. So what's the number one thing you want to achieve in 2019? And then what's the number one obstacle that's standing in the way? So I can give you a couple examples. Let's see. The number one result, create $60,000 a month in revenue, and the obstacle is awareness and trust. Very good. That's good to know. And so the next step, if we want to take this a step further, Joey says fear is the number one obstacle. Okay? And so let's see, save money, and the number one obstacle is gambling. Embarrassed to say that. It happens. But here's the key. If you don't know that that's the actual obstacle, would it be fair to say that you go, oh, I don't make enough money, or, oh, it's just because I'm stuck in this bad moment of life, or, oh, and we'd blame it on all kinds of stuff. But if you know the real obstacle, now we got to ask, what's the plan to overcome the obstacle? What's the plan to build awareness and trust? What's the plan to stop gambling? The goal to create a money machine, the obstacle, self-doubt. Okay, so you want to create a money machine. You want to get specific on how much money that machine is going to create for you. This will help. And then once you get clear and specific on what that number one or the number has to be, then you got to say, okay, now if self-doubt is the key, what's our plan to overcome that? Ban myself from casinos. Now here's what's interesting. People have found that if you try to just cut off a bad habit, often it'll be replaced by a worse or similar habit. So what you might want to do is, instead of banning yourself from casinos, give yourself the ability to have another option that you can get just as much of a thrill out of, but that's actually really healthy towards building that financial freedom that you're looking for, that extra money. Let's see, ClassPass, marketing to get people in, clear, powerful evangelism, and proof results. Okay, very good. So those are parts of the plan that can help. And when you write out this plan, I always say take 15 minutes and write down every possible piece of the plan you can come up with. Then go back without limiting yourself, without saying, oh, this one's dumb, or oh, that's stupid. Just write them all down. Then go back and figure out which ones are the most effective, which ones are going to give me the best ROI. And sometimes, you have to bounce it off a coach or bounce it off a mentor and say, hey, you've done this before. Which one will give me the biggest ROI in this case? And if you can't figure it out, then just try a couple and see what happens. But if you can figure out and get someone to give you some insight on it, something that's super helpful is all of a sudden it'll put you in a position where you can pick the 20% to give you 80% of the ROI, and then all of a sudden you'll start to get traction really quickly. The other thing you're looking for is which one give you the best ROI, because you can invest in all kinds of stuff. I've seen guys who are doing these big events and they're spending so much money advertising the event, it's not going to be profitable. And even though it looks like a huge deal, they've got stadiums full of people and the largest, the biggest, the best, the whatever they're going to call it. If they don't run it properly, it's a really silly. They got big, but they didn't get rich. And that's a silly way to run a business. Let's see. Number one, diversity of income. Fear is the number one obstacle. Start my coaching career. My obstacle is the fear that my price is too high. Interesting. Help at least 542 families this year. Technology is the obstacle. Okay. So as you look at these, the next question is we have, what's the goal? What's the obstacle? What's the plan? And then our next step is, what is the action we can take immediately? Or what are so we'll do two. What's the action we can take immediately to start making progress? And then what's the action we can take consistently to continue keeping progress? So this last question is, what's the action we can take immediately to build progress? What's the then action or habits we can do consistently to maintain progress? So 2 questions there. What's the habit you can do to immediately build progress? And I was taught ever since I was very little, never leave the sight of setting a plan or a goal without doing something to make it true. That way you show your body, this is real. I wrote this down and I did something. I made a phone call. I sent the email. I sent the text. I called the person. I followed up. I went and worked out. I went to the kitchen and threw away all the junk food. I came up with at least 10 other things I can do to get just as much as the thrill instead of the casino. I wrote down 5 different mentors I could call, and I sent each a text saying, hey, can we get together to discuss this? Or do you have any experience with this that you could help me with? But something you would do immediately to gain momentum towards this. And then the second part is, beyond what would you do immediately, the second element is, what could you do consistently? So something I learned when we started to hire people, I read a book and it was all about hiring, and it said, always be hiring. I was like, well, that's weird. Why are you always hiring? Because for most small business owners, by the time you need someone to replace, like someone just quit and they're leaving, it's too late, because now you're going, and running around trying to find the new person when you should be focusing on growing the business. And so instead of leaving that situation to occur, always have an add up, always be hiring, have a very structured 5-step hiring process that this book walked me through. That was very useful. And always be hiring. That way, worst case scenario, you find a world-class person that you would love to have on your team, and either A, you make a place for them, or B, you just say, listen, I know we're hiring. The spot isn't quite open yet. I love, and I really want you on our team. Is it okay if I keep your information right here? And if any time this spot opens, can I call you immediately and hopefully you can come and join us? And all of a sudden, let's say you have a pool of 10 people. Now, some of them might go get jobs other places or do other things, but maybe 2 or 3 of them are available. And all of a sudden, someone on your team who's a key player quits. You immediately go to the pool and say, hey, I just wanted to let you guys know we have this position open. We interviewed a long time ago. I loved what you're all about. Are you still interested in joining our team? And all of a sudden, what might have taken you days or weeks or months to track down this amazing new person, you'd immediately have someone to join your team right then and there. And so always be hiring. And that's part of a good strategy for keeping a solid team in place. So hopefully this is helpful. Follow these strategy steps. And I look very much to seeing you all tomorrow to continue this conversation.